Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about random acts of kindness. So, if you've ever heard of this notion of buying happiness, there is some truth to that, but maybe not quite how you would think. There is such a thing as going out and spending a lot of money on yourself and going out and spending a lot of money on other people, but what the research shows is the amount of money you spend on yourself does not give you lasting or meaningful increases in your subjective well-being, in your happiness, whereas the amount of money that you spend on other people has a linear relationship to your well-being. Which begs the question, why would we have a survival of the kindest kind of scenario going on? And it turns out, it looks like we might actually be wired for kindness. In fact, when we give to others, or act cooperatively, the reward centers of the brain, like the nucleus accumbens, it hums with activity. This is very dense with dopamine receptors, so you're actually getting something out of giving. Now, when we look at the data, we have to go back all the way to some ancient Eastern wisdom and say, there's a Chinese proverb that shows, if you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. There's some data to that. If you want happiness for a day, go fishing. I know of no data on that. If you want happiness for a month, get married, getting warmer. If you want happiness for a year, inherit a fortune, lasts about 2 years. And if you want happiness for a lifetime, help others. And that's where the science is new and growing and quite interesting. It turns out that helping others is something that not only are we wired to do, not only do we get benefits from doing it, but the data are pretty clear and interesting. Givers in this study of random acts of kindness had greater positive emotion, less negative emotion, and the receivers of these acts of kindness had larger and greater kind of authentic smiles relative to a control group. So giving in this way can be very beneficial to the giver. We'll come back to altruism in just a second. Sonia Lubomirsky has done some interesting research on this and shown that if you look across studies, that there is a biological set point for our happiness. Now, I want to get to the part of this that you can control. So about 50% of our happiness comes from our biological parents, but 10% of our happiness, our well-being, comes from the situation that we find ourselves in, the conditions of life. Having a long commute might make you miserable, but that's not genetic. It's not necessarily something that you have a lot of control over. But the other 40% of your happiness, which is left over, is the stuff that you make happen. These are choices that you make. This is where choices come in, and this is a big part of where random acts of kindness come into play. These are things that you choose to make happen. It's not the genetic cards that you've been dealt or the life situation that you find yourself in. And what this does is it increases happiness, not because it feels good, but it increases, these are increases in happiness that have to do with meaning. And that's where random acts of kindness come in as a way of increasing your sense of meaning. Not just a simple little quick dopamine hit to the brain because you bought a magazine, but this goes to Dasher Keltner's work. He wrote a wonderful book called Born to be Good, which is kind of survival of the kindest, and showed that if you chase after happiness, if your goal is to just want to be happy, anything to be happy, you have to ask yourself, well, am I happier yet? Am I happier yet? And in doing so, you take it from being a visceral thing to a cognitive thing, and you actually lose the energy, you lose a lot of that increase in your meaningful happiness, your eudaimonia. But if instead you make your focus the bringing other people's good to completion, if you make it a dedication to others, if you make it other focused, that actually increases your personal sense of meaning, and your happiness goes up as a result. So if you're trying to get happier, chasing after happiness doesn't work very well. But if you want to get happier, chase after meaning, and a byproduct of that is an increase in your happiness. So this is all to say that for your well-being and your resilience, other people matter. That's the bumper sticker from this from really this video and others, is just to say other people matter. Now we come into this question of altruism. So is there such a thing as altruism? If we put you under an fMRI, we look at what parts of your brain light up when you're thinking about holding a door open for a little old lady versus what parts of your brain light up when you're having that dream where it's raining money. Does everybody have that dream where it's raining money and you're running around picking up the money? It's the same part of the brain. Altruism and greed they're very hard to disentangle from imaging studies, which brings us back to this idea of these random acts of kindness. Doing a kindness is the single most reliable way to increase that meaningful well-being, that eudaimonia of any of the different exercises that have been looked at. So just find one completely unexpected, kind thing to do tomorrow, do it, and just notice what happens to your mood. You could pay the toll for the person behind you on the interstate. You can buy coffee for someone behind you in line. You can give your spouse or a significant other an unanticipated foot rub, and notice what happens to your mood. You could pay for the dinner for a couple struggling with a newborn in a restaurant and get up and leave before they have a chance to see what you're doing. All of these are examples of things that you do in the moment. You're not thinking too much about it. You're doing it because you can, you're doing it because you want to, and it has an impact on your mood. Well, did you know that related to this, that the #1 treatment for depression is getting this person who is severely depressed, who is having a hard time holding down a job or getting out of bed, get them to do something, however small, to help another person, to see the world from that other person's perspective, to feel relieved like the other person feels relieved, which gives them hope, like maybe I too can feel some relief from what I'm feeling. We are wired to see the world in some interesting ways through other people's perspectives. Now here's a caveat about these random acts of kindness. Don't overthink it. It turns out the more you are calculating in what's the perfect thing to do for this person, I want it to be the perfect gift, I want it to be the perfect random act of kindness. As you overthink it, you reduce your benefit and you reduce the benefit that the other person gets from receiving it. A wonderful example of how to do this is a colleague who did this at the Coca-Cola bottling company in Barcelona in Spain, and showed that doing a Secret Santa random act of kindness resulted in some pretty interesting effects. People had 2 weeks to do this. They were assigned a colleague, a coworker, that they would have to do a random act of kindness for, and the interesting results of the study showed that by doing a random act of kindness, or by receiving a random act of kindness, or by witnessing a random act of kindness, all of them worked the same way. They increased your sense of meaningful well-being, your eudaimonia. So, in your nightly logs for this particular exercise, we'll be asking you, what have you seen, what have you received, what kinds of acts of kindness have you committed yourself? As we go off, I want to leave with you a few examples as you begin your journey for the next several days into random acts of kindness. This could include things like paying a compliment to a friend, leaving a kind sticky note, tidying up a mess that you didn't make yourself, buying a coffee or a delicious dessert for someone else, maybe giving money to someone in need. It doesn't have to do with money. It could be things like listening to someone who's really struggling, giving them an ear and validating their concerns, praising the efforts of someone else. Or if someone's in a hurry, let them in front of you in the hallway or when you're driving on the interstate, but taking the time to step back and do one of these relatively random acts of kindness. Good luck with your kindness module.